Hello YouTube, the Tribe of the Horror Realm. Um, Happened to see a lot of videos going around recently where people were running down their top 10 90s horror films. Now, usually at the mere mention of 90s horror films, I usually get the expression of pretty much when you the same expression you would have when you walk into a bathroom and realize someone forgot to spray. The 90s horror, my general thought when I think of it is god-awful movie posters with poor photoshopping of floating heads of you know, pretty TV stars that are thrown onto the silver screen to run around in some pretentious slasher film. So that's my general outlook on 90s horror films. I kind of think it was a lull for horror films. Now, closer inspection, there really were a good amount of horror films that were put out. Maybe it was just my belief of the slasher genre that was really not my cup of tea. And I know that I have friends that will crucify me for it, but those movies like Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Valentine, and all those. What's the guy with the raincoat? I don't know. Anyways, all those films, just kind of one on top of the other, same thing. Not my cup of tea. Anyhow, I have here 13 movies that I did go through and decided these are probably my top favorite films. Now I know it's 10, but I couldn't really narrow them down, so maybe the last 3 could be just honorable mentions, but I wanted to give them props. So, starting with Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. Really an excellent film. The costumes looked awesome. The special effects really were pretty cool. And you had Gary Oldman, who's pretty badass. That, of course, in spite of Keanu Reeves being in the film. So this is one of those films that, even though there's someone I really disdain, there's too much good stuff going on for me not to enjoy it. And this is actually probably the closest to the Bram Stoker book itself. This is also one of Teresa's favorites. She has the one sheet for the bedroom upstairs. But not exactly like the book, but closest to it. Next one, I know I don't have the cover, but this is Biozombie. This is a Japanese horror film. Kind of like Shaun of the Dead in the sense it's like a zomcom. You have the main characters are two deadbeats that are kind of troublemakers, and there's a lot of slapsticks that goes on in the mall. I mean, when you have these two guys hassling some shop owner who says he's going to call and have him taken care of, and he makes a phone call to some guy he knows and says, yeah, I got these guys down here giving me a hard time. Send someone down to take care of them. All right, thanks. Hangs up and he's like telling them, oh, you better watch out. Next thing, one of their cell phones ringing. It's like, huh? What's up, boss? You want us to go down to the mall? Someone's bothering so-and-so. Okay. There you go. That's the type of silly humor that goes on in this film. But it's just really kind of a funny film, and just a different, more like the Japanese slapstick zombie flick. Number 11, Tales from the Dark Side. Really like this movie. Great 3 films that they did. They had a pretty cool cast. My favorite happened to be the one with Lover's Vow with Ray Don Chong. Really like that story. Thought it was an underrated film. It doesn't get a lot of talking to. Now we're getting into number 10, Cemetery Man, Della Morte dell'Amore. This Michel Sauvé film is probably the most beautiful zombie film that has ever been lensed. It's a really strange movie. I know that there's been debates about what the ending means and all. So it's more of a, I guess, more of a thing, can be presented as a thinking man's picture, a thinking woman's picture. Um, it's got a bit of that comedy element to it, but it's just one of those films that doesn't necessarily have to give you the answers in broad strokes. Number 9, From Dusk Till Dawn. This movie is, it probably could be considered a lot of action, like an action vampire film, but look what you got. You got a great shootout in this awesome looking bar. The Titty Twister never looked better. It was so disappointing in the sequels how they had to dumb down the size of the set for the Titty Twister, because that thing looked awesome. And of course you had Salma Hayek doing that snake dance, which was pretty cool until she got real ugly. But overall, really good film. Now we're up to number 8, and that is Subspecies. Um, I know sometimes a company like Full Moon doesn't always they kind of get a little smirking for their output, but overall, they do put out some enjoyable movies, and that's the bottom line, is you want to enjoy them. And Subspecies, and Radu in particular, was one of those vampires that was just creepy as all hell. I was really pumped when I got a chance to meet Anders Hove back in March, and from what I'm hearing, that they're going to be doing a full-blown Subspecies reunion at a future convention this year. Looking forward to that. So I know there's a lot of love on YouTube for Subspecies, and it doesn't go unnoticed in this home. Number 7, Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Anyone that's seen my channel knows I'm not the biggest Freddy Krueger fan, or that's my wife's job. But as far as New Nightmare goes, I really enjoyed it. For me, around at least part 5, the Dream Child, was where I pretty much figured that the series had jumped the shark, as they say. And when they got to part 6, Freddy's Dead, that jump pretty much stalled in midair, conked out, and then fell right down into the shark's mouth. Because Freddy's Dead was absolutely dreadful. But this one, Wes Craven turned it on its ear and came up with a really outside-the-box look on his whole film, and kind of put a little bit of I don't know, a little satire onto the whole thing. Number 6, probably this was one of my earliest DVDs I got, but Tremors. Love Tremors. Big, burrowing monsters. It's got Fred Ward and bacon. Well, not the edible kind, Kevin, nonetheless. Reba McEntire, Michael Gross. Just a really fun film. I enjoyed it a lot. Teresa likes it a lot. When I was picking these out, she remarked how we really have to sit down and watch Tremors again. So that's on the playlist. We're into the top 5. Army of Darkness. I don't have to get into it. Everyone knows the film. It was probably one of those films that they kind of looked at the original Evil Dead and said, well, what can we do with it? And the humor elements were really strong, so they went into that direction rather than trying to beat a dead horse with the whole pushing all the horror elements too much. And it got sillier and sillier as you went on, but you're working with what is Bruce Campbell's strength. So if you tried to push it into a real straight horror film, would it actually be as regarded as it is now? Probably not. So it was probably a very good decision, and really just an enjoyable film. I think that's my keyword, enjoyable film. Like my wife with her great film. It was a good movie. Number 4, Candyman. You had a tremendous actor in Tony Todd. Really, that voice just resonates with him. Then you had this other elements like the score by Philip Glass. I mean, when you put a classical music to a horror piece, it's just really just a whole different take, but it really worked. And you had a lot to do with. There's a lot more undertones to this film. There's the whole social aspect of it. There's as the series goes on, you get into the whole racial tension and interracial relationships. Um, it's touched very briefly on here, but in the future ones, it gets really into how Candyman came to be. But not only that, I mean, look at the setting. It's a rundown urban area, and seemingly no one cares what's going on there. And number 3, Dust Devil, Richard Stanley's film. Now, this one is one of those things you would call a waking nightmare. It's like when you're watching it, part of you, wants it to end because it's just so fearsome. This woman picks up this guy who's a serial killer, but he turns out to be a lot more than that. It's just a really frightening film and very underappreciated. This particular one is the limited collector's edition. It's got like 4 DVDs and a soundtrack, work print of Dust Devil, the final cut of Dust Devil. It really should get out there so more people can appreciate this film. Just all around, like I said, the best way to describe it is like a waking up in a nightmare. Number 2, Night of the Living Dead, 1990 version. Savini did a great job with this film. I'm not one that really enjoys when they take an original idea or something that's been done and just do it over, but this one was really successful. And what I really enjoyed out of it was that the Barbara character didn't become this catonic, useless piece of meat that Judith O'Dea's character was. Patricia Tallman's character was a very strong woman, and she come up with probably what most people, when they watched one of the early zombie movies until like the Zack Snyder era came up with, why don't you just walk by them? They're slow. Okay. Special effects were great. Just outstanding. You took a classic like Night of the Living Dead and you turned this one into a modern classic as well. I just thought this thing was fantastic. And number 1, and probably a good reason why I stay married, Takashi Miike's Audition. Watch this film. You will not want to date. It is just, yes, it's a slow burn film, and it's kind of like a basketball game. You could probably skip most of the game and go to the last few minutes of the movie or the game. Same thing here, but you really want to appreciate the whole film itself and do watch it right straight through. But again, if you haven't seen it, the ending is just something else. You just, like I said, I just can't fathom having to go through a dating scene and not have this in the back of my mind. So that's my 13 for Best of the 90s. And thank you very much for taking the time to watch. Bye-bye.